You don't have to cheat to be a winner. You don't have to steal to get it done. You don't have to lie and call me brother. Sometimes I think I just about had enough. Another war begins in South Africa. Oh my God. Another night of shambles, guns and knives. And the reason why it's so easy to discover is them diamonds in the ground worth more than my life. People make me cry. Sometimes when I'm alone, people make me cry. People make me sad. Some people in this world, they make me sad. Oh, been there. Sometimes I think, take my life too serious. Yes, there are many things I still don't understand. But you can't say for me that I am not curious. And it would make me happy when we all make a stand. Yes. People make me cry. Sometimes when I'm alone, how I cry. People make me sad. Some people in this world, they make me sad. Hey! Sometimes I think I take my life too serious. Yes, there are many things I still don't understand. But you can't say for me that I am not curious. And it would make me happy when we all make a stand. People make me cry. Sometimes when I'm alone, how I cry. People make me sad. Some people in this world, they make me sad. I'll tell you why. Because you don't have to cheat to be a winner. No, no. You don't have to steal to get enough. You cannot take my life away and still call me brother. Sometimes I think I just about had enough. What? You take my home, you take my pride, you still want to use me. Oh, you're cutting my inside out like a knife. You cannot take it all away and still abuse. Oh, been there. Sometimes I think, take my life too serious. Yes, there are many things I still don't understand. But you can't say for me that I am not curious. And it would make me happy when we all make a stand. Yes. People make me cry. Sometimes when I'm alone, how I cry. People make me sigh. Some people in this world, they make me sigh. Sometimes I think I take my life too serious. Yes, there are many things I still don't understand. But you can't say for me that I am not curious. And it would make me happy when we all make a stand. People make me cry. Sometimes when I'm alone, how I cry. People make me sigh. Some people in this world, they make me sigh. I'll tell you why. Because you don't have to cheat to be a winner. No, no. You don't have to steal to get enough. You cannot take my life away and still call me brother. Sometimes I think I just about had enough. What? You take my home, you take my pride, you still want to use me. Oh, you're cutting my inside out like a knife. You cannot take it all away and still abuse me. It's them diamonds in the crown worth more than my life. People make me cry. Sometimes when I'm alone, how I cry. People make me sigh. Some people in this world, they make me sigh. People make me cry. Sometimes when I'm alone, how I cry. People make me sigh. Some people in this world, they make me sigh. Oh, I don't me down the day. Oh, I don't me down the door. Only down the day. Oh, I down the day. Only down the door.
Good evening, and welcome to Politics 101 on a Thursday evening. It's a lovely, quiet evening here on the east coast of Demerara and Buxton, to be particular. We've been gone a couple of days. Please share the link, please share the link, please share the link, please share the link. Let the rest of the family know that we are on. Welcome to Politics 101. We have been gone a couple of days. I took time off to spend some time with family, passed through Washington, D.C., Maryland, to visit with my mother and by extension, my siblings, close friends. Hence a couple of days off. But we're back. We're back because the struggle goes on. The struggle goes on. Good evening to all of you, wherever you're joining us from, whether you're joining us from Buxton. Good evening to all the Buxtonians on the live tonight. I give thanks for being part of the Buxtonian family, to be part of the family of villagers. Buxton is one village, but we are a community of villages. And to be a villager is a privilege, a privilege. These historic places, shaped by the hands of those whose hands were cut off by slavery, but yet they persevered and they took their cash money and bought lands and transformed them into these villages. Good evening to my Buxtonian brethren and sisterin. Good evening to all villagers. Good evening to all of Guyana, whether you're joining us from the hinterland or on the coastland. It's a tremendous pleasure to be with you this evening. And to all my countrymen and women, Guyanese and the diaspora, the Caribbean, whether you're joining us from our sister Caribbean countries, stretching all the way from the Bahamas right down to Trinidad and Tobago in the south, and in between the isles of the Caribbean. Whether you're joining us from St. Martin or you're joining us from the continent, here, French Guyana, Suriname, Venezuela, Brazil, wherever Guyanese are, and wherever we are, we make our voices known. Good evening to all of you who are joining us from afar, further afar, North America, Canada, of course, the United States of America. Good evening to all of you. Good evening to all of you. Good evening to those of you joining us from Europe, in particular from England, the United Kingdom, Great Britain, France, Ireland. I know there are a few of us there. Welcome. Welcome to Politics 101 on a Thursday evening. Please share the link. Please share the link and let them know that Politics 101 is on. And we have a few things to talk about. So please spread the word and let everyone know that we are on this evening. The more things change, rearrange, they remain the same. But we press on. David Michael Rudder. Sometimes I take myself too serious.
Nuclear warhead. Do I see it torn down? And there's an army in retreat. I see the old colonials of Europe now become united. And that word, perestroika, it fills the streets. I see the eagle sitting on the shoulder of the bear. Or maybe it's the other way around. Is this the calm before the hellfire? Or is our tomorrow really heaven bound? But 1990, the blood still flows in Bogota. And from Beirut to Johannesburg, the river don't stop. 1990, third world children still wander in their boats, in their jungles, in their deserts, until they dry. It is strange. The more we change, the more we rearrange. Everything just seems the same as we move into the next century. 1990, please make a liar of me. Oh, oh, oh. Oh, 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 yeah, yeah. There is a black man on the run through a lonely Beijing street. There he goes. My God, he's running again. This time through Brooklyn, Howard Beach. And there he runs again through the streets of Soweto and Bensonhurst. And I'm saying, Lord, so the story goes. And the ghostly man from the past, they call him Selma, Alabama. He just shrugs and says, deja vu, I suppose. 1990, will our children stand firm? Or will they keep a running and a running and a running till the end of time? 1990, will hands of love ever reach out? Or will they be there just to strengthen the crime? It is strange. The more we change, the more we rearrange. Everything just seems the same as we move into the next century. 1990, please make a liar of me. Oh, oh, oh. Oh, oh, oh. LA's burning down. It reminds me of Harlem and what's in the 60s. Same problem, same country, and king is still the name. People shouting power, power to we the people, and equal rights and justice is still the game. I remember over 25 years ago, America stood up and said, this won't happen no more. Now you tell me, what have we become? Will the beast always defeat the beauty? Is this land just another house of the rising sun? 1990, will we see a tomorrow where our children will truly be free? 1990, is it joy, is it sorrow, as we move into the 21st century? I'm saying it is strange. The more we change, the more we rearrange, everything stays the same as we move into the next century. 1990, make a believer of me.
David Michael Ruther, 1990. 1990. A calypso that was written as we entered the 21st century. And Rudder, of course, was reflecting on the fate of the oppressed, asking the question whether the end of the Cold War would mean anything changing for those of us who are the children of the oppressed. And he said, please make a liar of me. I am pessimistic, Rudder says, that anything will change fundamentally for the fate of the poor, the powerless, for the fate of the black man. There he goes, running again through a lonely Beijing street. Will anything change? And we were asking the question in Guyana, with the advent of oil and gas, with the advent of our wealth, tremendous wealth, comparatively speaking, is anything changing for the oppressed in Guyana? Is anything changing for the poor and the powerless in Guyana? We continue to be poor. We continue to suffer. You just have to go into the market. Economic oppression. And economic oppression is political oppression. Things are not changing drastically for the better. We continue to mourn the passing of someone who was always optimistic, Dr. Rupert Roopnarine. Continue to mourn his loss. He has lived for 83 years, but these days, 83 years is, some people argue, very young, but he gave all his life to the struggle for the betterment of our people, to the betterment of the poor. And as I have said, that Guyana is a better place because someone like Rupert Roopnarine walked with us. We are going to send him home formally on Sunday, but we hope to spend the next couple of weeks celebrating his life and do as we must do in a place like Guyana, to acknowledge the contributions of those who made the ultimate sacrifice. People like Rupnarain could have done anything with his life. He was a first-rate scholar, went to Cambridge. He was a cricketer. He could have gone on to become a first-class cricketer, but he chose to come back to Guyana and to stand in the ranks of the poor. And we often do not reflect enough on those who make that ultimate sacrifice. He didn't come and walked into Parliament and walked into the cabinet. He came back and he went into the valleys and struggled there with the poor and the powerless. And so we continue to give thanks. We continue to give thanks for Dr. Rupnarain. We continue to give thanks for him and his life.
And intellectual landscape, who died at the age of 83. Antonio Day has more.
Dr. Rupert Rupnarain's death was announced by Dr. David Hinds, co-leader of the Working People's Alliance, WPA, who hailed him as quote-unquote, one of the leading voices of our post-colonial experience. His legacy is marked by decades of tireless activism, academic contributions, and public service. Dr. Rupnarain's return to Guyana in 1977 marked the beginning of a profound involvement in the country's political development through the WPA. A passionate advocate for multi-ethnic politics and national unity, he firmly believed that true progress required collective advancement across all communities. His commitment to coalition politics and national governance helped shape discussions that eventually influenced the formation of the coalition, a partnership for national unity, underscoring his vision of inclusive governance. Beyond his political endeavors, Dr. Rupnarain was an esteemed scholar and cultural advocate with a strong foundation in English literature. He served as a lecturer at the University of Guyana, where he notably studied the poetry of Martin Carter. His intellectual pursuits extended into filmmaking and public scholarship, reflecting a lifelong dedication to Caribbean radical thought and the empowerment of the working class. His journey was not without sacrifice. He endured political detention during tumultuous periods, and at times chose activism over academia to fulfill and to fully commit to the cause. In paying tribute to this stalwart of a man, Dr. Hinds emphasized that Guyana is better in many regards because of Rupert Rupnarain, a man who uniquely fused intellectual depth with unwavering political conviction. Although he had been declining in health in recent years, Rupnarain's influence remains deeply embedded in the national discourse. As the country reflects on his life and legacy, tributes continue to pour in from across political divides, honoring a figure whose impact on Guyana's modern political history is both profound and enduring. I'm Antonio Day reporting for the
one of many acknowledgement there of the contributions of Dr. Rupert Rupnarain. And so many of us, younger, well, we are older now, but we were younger then, came into contact with the Rupnarains of this world. And I can speak for myself that I think that my life, in many regards, has been influenced for the better from the personal and political contact with people like Rupert Rupnarain. We often take it for granted because these are people that you knew all your life, practically. Dr. Rupnarain came back in 1977. I was just out of high school, a 16-year-old, what they would say these days, little boy. And got to know people like Rupnarain and others, and what became a lasting relationship that I treasure. And so often we do not reflect enough on the sacrifices of these people. One Indian brother, I saw the airport yesterday in Miami, and he came up to me and said, "You are Dr. David Hinds?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I want to tell you that my view of you has changed." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yes." He said, "I've been following Dr. Rupert Roopnaarayan's life since he died, and I never knew that he made such an important contribution to Guyana." I said, "Uh-huh." He said, "Yes." He said, "And I came across some pictures way back and saw you were there with Dr. Roopnaarayan and Iyusi Kwayana and others marching in 1985. I said, "Yes." He said, "Yes." He said, "You know, I didn't know you were in politics that long. I thought you were in politics. You came into politics the other day." I said, "Yes." He said, "Yes, yes. I really thought that you were just one people. I didn't know that way back then you were fighting against a government of your own people." And I laughed so hard, and I asked him for his forgiveness for laughing. And he said he understood because he said, "A lot of Indian people think your politics start yesterday." And I reflected on that, on how misguided and misplaced a lot of our people are through no fault of theirs. You know, there is something that we call agents of socialization. These are institutions and people who influence people's outlook on life. And an important agent of socialization is the political party. We have other agents of socialization: the family, the education system, the church, religion, geography, where you were born, where you grew up. All those things influence your worldview. And the political party is one of the important influencers of people's worldview. And the PPP, in recent times, they have influenced the worldview of at least 2 generations of their supporters. And they've influenced them in a way to dislike people like myself. Those of us who made the ultimate contribution. I am not like Rupert Roopnaarayan and others, not that gifted. And so I couldn't say I could have done anything with my life. But I got opportunities that came my way, and I was able to do things that I would not normally do, would not normally have done, given where I came from. But, you know, later on, because of those opportunities, I could have chosen what to do with my life. I could have chosen to sit in a university and teach books and read books and so forth. But I chose to continue my activism. And like I said, you know, institutions like the PPP, like the media, do not do justice sometimes to the history of this country. They write some people out of history. You know, I remarked on this program a couple of nights ago when I was talking about the Stabroek News, and I was mourning the passing of the Stabroek News, because I think in the last 5 decades, it was easily the best newspaper in Guyana. But the Stabroek News had a personal vendetta against me and the WPA. I don't know why, we can speculate. They never covered me in the last 6 years. They never covered the WPA. And in doing that, they, in a sense, write us out of history. So you cannot blame people like the gentleman that came up to me and said he never knew that I was involved in politics going right back to the 1970s and 80s, that he thought I was some activist who just like Black people and don't like Indian people. until Dr. Rupert Rupnarine died. And as he said, he saw my life program in the morning and saw me speaking about Dr. Rupnarine, and he thought I was being genuine when I said Dr. Rupnarine transcended race. And he couldn't envisage, given what he had heard about me, could not envisage that I could revere an Indian leader. And so he said his view of me has changed. His view of me has changed because he realized that although I love myself, I love my race, that I love humanity, and that I have no problem in serving under Indian people and Indian leaders. It took Dr. Rupnarine's death for some people to understand that. And so some of our institutions, the media, the political parties, they do not do justice to our history. And so we have generations of our people who do not have an inkling of the pillars that have helped to bring our nation to where it is today. Those who are supporters of the PPP believe that the only people who made any contributions to Guyana was the PPP, is the PPP. I heard one member of parliament, I think a minister, on the government side in his contributions in parliament, talking about how sugar workers in the 1970s and 80s fed this country. It was the revenue from sugar that carried the country. It was the revenue from rice that carried the country. This is a government minister in the National Assembly saying that. And I sat there and eventually I shouted and I said, bauxite also, gold also. Because when he was talking about sugar and rice carrying this country, he was correct, but only partly correct. Because in the 70s and the 80s, Guyana got tremendous revenue from bauxite. In fact, it got more revenue from bauxite than from sugar. By the time we got to the 1970s and the 1980s, sugar had begun to decline as a money earner for this country. Europe had discovered new sweeteners and they had turned their backs on sugar. Sugar prices had gone down. And many countries in the Caribbean divested and diverted away from sugar. Barbados moved from sugar to tourism. Jamaica moved from sugar to bauxite. Bauxite and banana and tourism. And so it was bauxite. At that time, Jamaica, Guyana, and Suriname had the best grade of bauxite in the world, and there was a demand for bauxite. And so our revenues came, but there was this minister in the National Assembly telling the country and the world that it was sugar and rice that carried Guyana. And when you think about sugar and rice in our multi-ethnic society, by inference, he's saying it was Indian Guyanese who fed Guyana and carried Guyana. But that was only partly true. Bauxite and gold, bauxite more than gold, was influential, was a money earner for this country. I wouldn't say bauxite alone carried Guyana. We were still getting some revenue from sugar and rice, along with bauxite. That's what carried Guyana. But if you listen to the Minister of Government, it was giving a narrative that was not complete. And one has to be very careful when one gives that narrative. Because in saying so, it has ethnic implications about who built this country. You see? And so our institutions, our politicians have to do much better in terms of the narratives that they peddle. The narratives that they peddle. Because it could have implications. Because if half of the population walks around believing that they are the ones who saved Guyana and that others did not contribute to Guyana, then it injures ethnic and racial solidarity in our country. It hinders and injures ethnic relations because one side will feel a sense of triumphalism. Another side will feel a sense of defeat, a low sense of worth. My people did not contribute to Guyana. And so we have to be very careful about what we do with history. And those of us who happen to be agents of socialization, we have a responsibility to be very careful about how we translate for younger generations our history. I think we're having some problems on Facebook tonight. And those of you who would normally join the program from Politics 101 are having some issues in accessing the program. Some of you have migrated to other pages and other sources. I don't know what is causing the problems with Facebook here tonight, but I hope that we are able to correct it. I hope we are able to correct it. But as I was saying, we have to be very careful. We have to be very careful with how we talk about our history, and do so in a responsible way, lest we give people wrong impressions, and as a result of that, cause disharmony in our society. I can't remember if it was on this program, maybe on this program. I think I did say that Dr. Jagan was prepared to serve under Mr. Burnham. And PPP supporters went berserk. On social media. David Hines is a liar. And I noticed Mr. Rohi commented. He didn't call me a liar because he knew it was true, but he didn't rebuke them and say that what Hines was saying is true. That the National Patriotic Front of 1977, the PPP, proposed a government between the PPP and the PNC and was prepared for Mr. Burnham to be the president and Dr. Jagan to be a vice president or prime minister or whatever it was. And again in 1985. In 1985, as I recounted, the talks were very advanced. Very, very advanced. And the untimely death of Mr. Burnham did not help, because after Mr. Burnham died, Mr. Hoyt closed down the talks. But in 1985, they were prepared to serve under Mr. Burnham. So on the one hand, you have the demonization of Burnham that is beyond political disagreement. And then you have people like us in the WPA that tell us, you all are sitting in the APNU with Burnham people, and Burnham people kill Rodney. And so we are bad people because we coalesce with the PNC. Yet the PPP was prepared to coalesce with the PNC when they were out of power, and not just coalesce with the PNC, but to serve under Burnham. So if Burnham was the devil, why would you want him to be president? And you serve under him as president, why would you want to serve under the devil? You can't answer that. So they say, Dr. Hinds is lying. Jagan never did this. Some of them clearly don't know. Some of them know, and they're stifling their conscience. But we are not doing ourselves a favor when we mess with our history. As people know, I have my problems. I've had my problems with Burnham. I've had my problems with the PNC. I belong to the WPA that challenged Burnham, the Burnham regime, confrontation between the two parties. And so I have my criticisms of Burnham, criticisms of the PNC government, as I have my criticisms of Jagan, and criticism of the PPP government, and my criticisms of Granger and the coalition government, my criticisms of the present government. Governments are all powerful. And you have to keep governments under close manners, regardless of which government. Because government by itself could get out of control. But let us get back to the Burnham thing. As I said, we have had our difficulties, our disagreements. We felt that the PNC regime was authoritarian. PNC people, on the other hand, don't like to say that, although I have to say that more PNC people admit, more African Guyanese admit that there were problems with the PNC government than PPP supporters admit that the PPP has flaws. But one cannot run away from the fact that Burnham had some progressive policies which have served this country well up to today. You know, you can't run away from that. Burnham's foreign policy was far more advanced than the foreign policy of governments after then, including the Hoyt government and the successive PPP governments. In terms of policy choices, the Burnham time, they didn't have oil. They had little resources. But what Mr. Burnham did policy-wise for education, policy-wise for healthcare, we have to laud those things as progressive policies in the time they were advanced. And you only have to look at some of us and you ask if there was not free education from nursery to university. At that time, what would have become of so many of us? To have given free education from nursery to university in the 1970s and the 1980s was a tremendous sacrifice. The country could not afford it. Yet Burnham and the PNC thought it was important to take that risk of doing it. Because in doing so, you are producing at least 2 generations of what we call educated people. Eventually, it could not be sustained. And Mr. Hoyt started to scale it back, and the PPP came in and got rid of it. I didn't agree for them to get rid of it. They could have, they could have reformed it rather than getting rid of it. You look at Barbados. Quietly, Barbados maintained free education from nursery to university. And one government came in and tried to mess with it, I think the Fundel Strode government. And the people of Barbados were up in arms. And Mia Motley came in and she had to restore it right away. Barbados continued free education, free transportation in public buses and so on. What they loosely call the welfare state. And Barbados is known as the most stable, of the Caribbean, English-speaking Caribbean countries. They made those choices. And you can have your difficulties with Burnham, your differences. But to say that, Burnham starved people and so on, I mean, part of it is political rhetoric, and I don't mind the political rhetoric. But you have to put these things in context and let our children know the truth. I know sometimes the PNC people go overboard in that they felt that Burnham didn't make any mistakes. Of course, Burnham made mistakes. You put power in human beings' hands, and if you don't check the power, then they will make mistakes. And Burnham made mistakes at the level of governance. At the level of governance, Burnham made mistakes like Jagan, like Eric Williams, like the Manleys, like Barrow. They all didn't handle the question of governance effectively. The ones in Africa too. They didn't, in India. They didn't handle the question of governance. But at the level of policy, education policy, social policy, foreign policy, you have to give them credit. And I think that's where PPP people get it wrong. The whole thing about Burnham banning this and banning that and thing, it was during a period when resources are scarce, and it was the policy of growing more at home, using local products, and cutting down on imports. And Burnham was not single in that. Most third world countries embarked on that policy initiative of cutting down your import bill. Because, like I said, money was scarce. And so to say that Burnham starved Indians by banning wheat flour is to, again, being stupid, to use one of Jack Dio's terms. Because you are saying that wheat flour is only used by Indians. Indians use wheat flour to make roti, black people use it to make bread. So if Burnham banned flour and it had some ethnic implications, then he was punishing his own race. He was starving his own race. But if you were to listen, is that they're saying Burnham was starving Indians. And it is not true. All races were affected by the ban on importation of wheat and flour, because they all use wheat flour for different things. Black people use wheat flour to make bread, to make bake. Indian people use it to make roti. Amerindians, I think, use it to make some of their products. So this demonization of Burnham, it leads to a misunderstanding of our politics and our history. And not I'm saying one can be critical of Burnham and one should be critical of Burnham. But one has to make a distinction between a critique of Burnham's style of governance, the way he dealt with opposition, the way he dealt with dissent. You can be critical of that. But you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And that's what they're doing. The irony of all of this is that when you look at the present PPP government and you look at their style of governance, their method of governance, it's more authoritarian than Burnham. When you look at the way they deal with the opposition, it's more authoritarian than Burnham. So the problem of governance is not a problem of Burnham and the PNC. It's a problem of post-plantation societies, like Guyana, like Trinidad, like Barbados, like wherever. In Asia, in Africa, these post-colonial societies have not dealt with the problem of governance in an effective way. In fact, you look at a country like America, who thought they'd solved the problem of governance. You know, they would say America is the most democratic society in the world. Look at the unraveling of democracy in America right now. Look at how democracy is unraveling. Despite all the institutions in America, the democratic institutions, there comes an administration, and that administration is testing the limits of democracy and in undermining the system. So the problem of democratic government, the problem of governance, is a problem that is not unique to any one party, to any one government. Even we progressives, those of us who are radicals, in the English-speaking Caribbean, we had one chance in Grenada during 1979 and 83. If you look at the social policies during the Grenadian Revolution, very advanced, very advanced. But the question of governance, they didn't pass the test. Eventually, they end up shooting up one another and helping to kill the revolution. But the social policies were advanced. So the conclusion is that whether we are left wing, right wing, center wing, we have not dealt with the question of democratic governance very well in our post-colonial era. It's unfinished business. But when you single out Burnham and the PNC and said, well, they were dictatorial, and they're this and they're that, you're then saying that the others were not dictatorial, and the others are even more dictatorial. I used to have an argument with some seniors of mine who used to tell me, David, when we get enough, the richer Guyana becomes, the more democratic it will become. I remember some economists used to tell me that, I'm not going to call their name because after a time they realized that that thesis was wrong. But there was a strong thesis that was peddled from America and the West, that all you have to do is to improve the economy and democratic governance will improve. Well, Guyana's economy is improved tremendously, tenfold, 100-fold, $1.5 trillion budget. But our democracy has declined. So the thesis that democracy would advance when there is plenty has been destroyed by the experience of Guyana. That we have plenty, and the more we get, the more undemocratic we have become. And so we have a problem with democratic governance in Guyana and the post-colonial society. In fact, all governments across the world, because we have seen it in Europe, we have seen it in the United States of America. And so the PPP has socialized at least 2 generations of their supporters to believe a narrative that is not true. So when the gentleman told me that his view of me has changed, his view was that I like Black people, and so I hate Indians. And it took Dr. Rupnaraine's death for him to realize, although it's known, Rupnarine was a leader of the WPA, for him to think that I can revere an Indian leader. You want to know where people develop this kind of consciousness from. People like David Hines and so on don't like Indian people, don't like Indian leaders. And he looked at me the morning and he said he knew I was genuine when I eulogized Dr. Rupert Rupnarine. He then realized that I served under an Indian leader, and I have no problems in serving under an Indian leader. I'm doing better than Dr. Jagan. Dr. Jagan never served under any other leader. He was always the leader from the time he got in to formal politics. When the PPP was formed in 1953, he was always the leader. He never served under another Indian leader. He never served under a Black leader. Burnham served under Jagan. So Burnham served under another leader, and Burnham served under an Indian leader. Guyana served under Jagan. Dr. Jagan is the PPP leaders are the only ones who never served under somebody of another race. Sam Hines was president for a little period of time until they maneuvered him out of the presidency. So Jack Dio never served effectively under another leader, under an African leader, never. Irfan Ali never served under an African leader. I served under an Indian leader. I have no problems in doing so. But yet I am the racist. We are the racists. Burnham served under Jagan, but you will never hear that. And like I said, in fairness to Jagan, he was prepared to serve under Burnham. He was prepared to serve under Burnham. It never happened, and that's a fact. And so we have to be very careful with our history. I take blows here, and I'm prepared to take blows. People don't like when I call PPP leaders brothers. People didn't like when I heard Mr. Jack Dio was sick, and I wish him a speedy recovery. And I understand that our supporters have been so beaten by the PPP that they have a problem with some of us who have a human response to PPP leaders. And I'm prepared to take that blows. I'm prepared to take it. Because I think sometimes you have to be led by the people. And most times I'm led by our supporters. But sometimes you have to take the leadership on some issues. And I'm prepared to take that criticism from our supporters. Because my opposition to the PPP is not an opposition to them, their leaders, as individuals, as human beings. I don't. I think some of them are fine human beings. I don't know them well, I have to assume, because I believe in the thesis that mankind are generally good, essentially good beings. But we become bad beings when we find ourselves in bad situations, whether we are corrupted by money or corrupted by power. But essentially, human beings are good. I come from that philosophical origin. And yet, yes, PPP people, I think some of them hate me. But that doesn't mean I should hate them. And I wouldn't hate them. I hate their politics. And that is what I fight against. But they have socialized 2 generations of their supporters to believe that it's okay for Indian people, Indian leaders to love their people. But African leaders must not love their people. Because in their head, the Africans on their side are on their side because they, they do not love their people. And they're okay with that. They're okay with Africans who they think that do not love their fellow Africans. I am not saying that PPP Africans don't love their people. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that the supporters, a lot of the supporters of the PPP are okay with Africans who don't love their people. And those of us who say we love our people, they have a problem with us. I said to the gentleman yesterday, I said, can you be mad with a pandit? For loving his flock? He said, no. He said, but you are not a pandit. I said, no, I'm not a pandit. I'm a chief. I'm an African chief. He said, I didn't know that. I said, there are many things you don't know. There are many things you don't know you didn't know. And I said, there are pandits who are sitting on the government bench. They love their people and they're in politics. And do you think they stop loving their Hindu flock when they get into politics? He said, no. I said, well, why? One standard for them and another standard for me. Guyana has to stop degenerating into a society where one race is treated as untouchables by their leaders. That is, their leaders must not love them. African leaders must not love African people. It's a crime. And when you look at black politicians, when you look at African politicians in Ghana, they steer very clear of talking about black people. They talk about our indigenous people easily. Everybody talks about Amerindian people easily because you're not going to be punished for that. Everybody talk about Indian people. Pago is coming up, or black people are going to play Pago. Good. Excellent. You're not going to be punished for it. But black people cannot talk about black people, and our leaders acquiesce to that because you could lose votes. You could lose votes if you are an African leader and say you love African people. It is true. Because this is how the PPP is socialized. I'm not saying Indian people are naturally like that. I don't believe that. I don't think Indian people naturally think that black people should not love their people. I don't think Indian people naturally believe that, but they've been socialized to believe it by the PPP. And so you have generations of African leaders who will not use the term African in public because they don't want to be called racist. Nobody likes to be called racist. I don't like to be called racist. I don't. But if I had to make a choice between being called a racist and denying my people, I will let them call me racist because I will not deny my people. I will not deny my heritage. I have that clear choice, and I'm very clear about that. Call me racist if that's what you choose to do, and you don't want me to acknowledge my people. I will prefer to acknowledge my people and being called a racist. And those are things we have to correct in our country. You see, when you demonize Burnham, and I'm making a distinction between criticism of Burnham and demonizing of Burnham. When you demonize Burnham, it has ethnic implications. Because what you're saying is that African people cannot run anything. That is one of the outcomes. At the end of slavery in the United States of America, the white establishment wanted black people to leave America because they said, these people cannot exist in a state of freedom. They don't use that language in Guyana, but that's the meaning, that black people cannot exist in a state of freedom. Why give them power? They mess up everything. They mess up sugar, they mess up this, they mess up that. And so they cannot exist in a state of freedom. They cannot govern. I heard one Indian commentator refer to Burnham as the Idi Amin of Guyana. And the PNC leader was on the program. And she couldn't respond. She was defending Burnham and defending the PNC, but when the guy said Idi Amin, she didn't defend because she didn't know. She didn't know the meaning of what he said. For them, Idi Amin was not just a dictator, he was ugly. And she had no idea what Idi Amin meant in local ethnic terms. So, although she was defending Burnham, she didn't defend him on that because she didn't know. She didn't know it was a dog whistle, to use an American term. And so we have to correct these things. You know, you can't, what David Rudder said, you don't want to tear my life away and then call me brother. You don't want to demonize me and then call me brother. And this is what passes for politics in Guyana. We have to correct it. And that is why I think Rupert Roopnarine has been important to Guyana. He carved out a niche for him. Young brother called me up. He said, Dr. Hines, do you really meant it when you said Dr. Roopnarine transcended race? I said, yes. He said, I believe Dr. Roopnarine transcended race, but I'm having difficulty with you saying it is possible to transcend race. I asked him why. He said, well, you know, you're a race man. I said, yes, I'm a race man. But there are people who transcend race. And I can't deny that. Not many people are people in public life. I see people in normal life do it every day. But people in public life. Dr. Roopnarine, he didn't have to make an effort to transcend race. He didn't have the burden of confronting race in a way that a Guyana had, or a Rodney, or a Ogunse. These are activists who have to confront race. Dr. Rupert Ryan didn't have to confront race in the same way. He confronted it by transcending it. Let me put it that way. Some of us have to confront race by attacking races. Dr. Rupert Ryan transcended race. He confronted race by transcending it. And I said the test for me was how comfortable he was among Africans. I know a lot of non-racist Indians, a lot of them, but when they're among Black people, they're uncomfortable. And I know a lot of non-racist African people who, when they're among Indians, they're uncomfortable. Rupert Ryan was uncomfortable among Africans. He was as comfortable among Africans as he was among Indians. And like I said, it's not, he didn't have to put it on. It was the nature of his politics. As I said, some of us confronted race because we have to attack racism. And people like Rupert Ryan confronted race by transcending it, not ignoring it. Rupert Ryan never ignored race. Some people like Freddie Kissoon are saying Rupert Ryan didn't like Indian people. He was more comfortable because I think Rupert Ryan said sometime that he was more comfortable at Linden than other places, and they felt it was a crime. The Ravi Devs of this world, they said he wasn't Indian enough because he said he was more comfortable among the people of oh my, tonight is sneezing night. He was more comfortable among people at Linden. I know he was comfortable among people at Linden. I saw him at Linden so many times in my life. And he was comfortable there with the bauxite workers. He was comfortable in Buxton. And I think that was the hallmark of his politics. He didn't fake multiracialism. He didn't have to use the word multiracial every 2 minutes to prove that, he was comfortable among Africans. He didn't. It just flowed. It just flowed. And that was his niche. So when it came time to break the ice with the PNC and to normalize relations between the WP and the PNC, he was the ideal person to lead. He, along with Dr. Thomas, Clive Thomas, they led the negotiations to normalize relations with the PNC. And so one has to see our politics in different ways than what we are doing now. Mark Benchop, was roasting Prime Minister Eric Phillips and others, not Eric Phillips, sorry Eric, Mark Phillips, and others who were demonizing Burnham, wanting to be critical of Burnham. I don't have a problem with that. With the demonization, and Mark Benchop had to take him on and to say, you're wrong. Freddie Kissoon is into that nonsense now. Well, Freddie Kissoon is a different case. There was a time when Freddie Kissoon was on the side of the no opposition. He was very critical of Jagan, very critical of the PPP. And now he's on the side of the PPP, and he feels that he has to be overcritical of Burnham and others, and being overcritical leads him into demonization. Look at the way he demonizes Burnham. demonizes Guyana, demonizes Rodney, demonizes Rupert Rupnarine. Rupert's crime is that he felt that Rupert was too comfortable with black people. And he, Freddie, was comfortable with black people until recently. And that is why a lot of black people are questioning whether he was ever genuine. But Freddie was comfortable with black people. Freddie grew up in Georgetown, Wortmanville. He couldn't escape black people. Had to be comfortable with black people. But look at the way in which he's now demonizing black leaders. Not critical. It's okay to be critical. Demonizing. So we have to be very careful with our history. I heard a young lady in Parliament talking about Brindley Ben's commitment to the PPP. And again, she was being partly correct. What she didn't say and perhaps didn't know, shockingly, that Brindley Ben left the PPP when the PPP lost power in 64. He left the PPP. From 1965, did not go back into the PPP until 1992 when the PPP came back to power and they sent him to Canada as the High Commissioner. For 27 years, Brindley Ben was not in the PPP. But if you were to hear the young lady speak in Parliament, you would not believe that Brindley ever left the PPP. And what was even more surprising is that maybe the young lady didn't know that Brindley was a founding member of the WPA. He formed an organization called the Working People's Vanguard Party. And along with IPRA and ASCRE and Ratoon, he was a founding member of the WPA. And he left the WPA because he felt the WPA was too soft on Jagan, and he didn't like the close relations that the WPA was developing with Jagan and the PPP, and he left the WPA. And if you were to hear this young lady talk about Brindley's commitment to the PPP, and this was a man who left the WPA because WPA was moving to closer relations with the PPP. Brindley Ben, of course, is the father of Robeson Ben and others. And this young lady in Parliament was close to Brindley Ben and should have known. Either she didn't know or she pretended she didn't know. Falsifying history. You know, facts are facts. But you can't bend facts to suit your political agenda and get away with it. Brindley Ben exercised his right to leave the PPP, and he stayed out for almost 3 decades. And that must be said. He was hostile to Jagan. When some others in the WPA were working for closer relations with Jagan, he would have none of it. Yet, to hear the young lady talk is to believe that Brindley never left the PPP. You know, we have to do much better than we are doing, because we are creating a nation that is unfamiliar with its own history. And these people are becoming leaders. I can't remember who it was that was speaking there in the National Assembly, and they were making reference to the 1970s and the 1980s, and they were saying Dr. Hines should know. He was there and so on, and I had to shout across and say, tell your colleagues about my history. Let them know that I was a revolutionary and I'm still a revolutionary. I'm not a racist. Tell them. Because in their head, I'm a racist. I'm defending black people. They're, and so they're not being told that I came into politics defending Indian people. Defending the oppressed. Defending those who ask for defense. Indian people under the PNC cried out. And as my brother Takumo Ogunse likes to say, we never asked them whether they're right or wrong. Along with Indian leaders, we defended them. When Anil Rampersad was charged for treason for killing an African soldier at the toll gate on the quarantine, we defended Anil Rampersad. When teachers on the quarantine were fired because they opposed the government, we defended them. When sugar workers went on strike in 1977, the 135-day strike, and the government broke the strike by sending scabs in and punished the sugar workers, we defended them, as we should do. Now when public servants are being punished by this government, we defend them, as we must do. When teachers are being punished by this government, we defend them, as we must do. When young Africans are being murdered on the streets in their scores, in their hundreds, we defend them, as we must do. Because we once defend Indians when they suffered the same fate. Right is right, wrong is wrong. And that is the legacy of a Rupert Roopnarine. Stand up for what is right. Stand up for justice. Stand up for freedom. There are some black people who still have not forgiven us in the WPA. They said we have to bring down Burnham. And look what Indian people are doing us now. And they're correct. We fought against the Burnham government. We have to bring the PPP into government. And look what the PPP is doing to us in the WPA now. They're right about that. But that doesn't mean that we were wrong when we did what we did. We stood up against injustice. And that is the legacy of a Dr. Rupert Roopnarine. The legacy of the freedom fighters of his generation. And our country is a better place because of it. People always say what vote you bring and so on. Justice is not measured by votes. Justice is not measured by votes. The quality of one's contribution is not measured by the number of votes you get. Scoundrels could get votes. Crooks could get votes. Scoundrels and crooks don't stand up for justice and freedom. Hitler did not overthrow any government. Hitler came to power via an election. The apartheid leaders in South Africa did not overthrow any government. They came to power through elections. White people could vote and elected them. Any crook could get votes. Any scoundrel could get votes. Do I love to have votes? Of course I do. Of course. Once you fight in elections, you want votes. But do you judge the quality of one's contribution to one's country only by the votes they got. Little known brother to this generation passed away, I think the day after Dr. Rupnarayan. Dr. Gunraj Kumar was a member of the Liberator Party in the 1970s. He was a medical doctor. He was part of what the PPP called the right wing. Got out of politics, and I think migrated to Canada. He passed away in Canada. I think he was about 90 years old. I remember him well. I had the opportunity in those days to speak on a couple of platforms with him at some of the joint meetings we had in those days. Gunraj Kumar of the Liberator Party. May his soul rest in peace. This week we are sending home Jesse Jackson. See them go away one by one. But the struggle continues, as it must. Correct the history. Correct the narrative. Don't lie to our young people. Don't lie to this generation. Because when you lie to them, they take those lies into places that give them a skewed sense of our country's history. It should not take the death of Rupnarayan for some people to recognize that people like Dr. Rupnarayan walked this Guyana and contributed tremendously. I saw in the newspapers this morning where they talk about him as a cricketer, 8 for 98, Cambridge University against Essex. Yes, he played county cricket. Could have gone on to be an excellent off spinner. Chose to come back to Guyana to fight for liberation. What we call the constitutional reforms that we have now. Rupert Rupnarayan was one of 3 leaders who led that process. And note I'm giving credit to the others, Haslin Paris and Ralph Ramkaran, along with Rupert Rupnarayan. Those were the 3 leaders in Parliament at the time of constitutional reform in 2001. Let it be known here tonight that there are others whose names may not be on the lips of every Tom, Dick, and Harry Lal, but they made tremendous contributions. Yes, Rupert Rupnarayan was a film maker. He made it around the time he made an Indian film, I think, on Shivratri. I am not as conversant with the Indian culture, but I know that he made Indian films. Yet they will tell you he wasn't Indian enough. He wrote poetry. He was one of the finest orators that our country has ever seen. He did not win 1 million votes. Worked tirelessly to make our country a better place. I'm glad. I'm honored to have been his follower. When you have leaders like that, I don't care whether they're Indians, Africans, or whoever, when you have that quality of leadership, people like us are prepared to follow. Did Rupnarayan have his shortcomings? You bet. All of us do. Our political shortcomings. He did have political shortcomings. But now is not the time to talk about that. Now is the time to say thank the ancestors, thank God. Thank the people of Guyana for giving us that quality of humanity. Hold on to the best in us. Jackson and Burnham led the way, but others made telling contributions also. The hand doesn't have just two fingers. We are moving on as we must, always. We are better than we are. We are better people, we are a better country. We are a better society than we have been led to believe. The PPP has a lot of correcting to do. It has led the way in destroying, to a large extent, that which it contributed to building. We are all in this thing together. We are all in this together. The CARICOM leaders are meeting. Mrs. Kamala Bissessar has decided that she's going to go one way. She's critical of her colleagues for not supporting, giving more of their support to America. It's a right to do so. She's wrong in terms of her balance. She made a telling point. She criticized her former leaders for interfering in internal affairs in countries. Where was Kamala when CARICOM interfered in the 2020 election? Where was Kamala? Where was Kamala Bissessar when CARICOM interfered? She was in the opposition. And her friends, the interference helped her friends in Guyana. You can't want to suck cane and blow whistle at the same time, Kamala. It's either you believe in a principle or you don't believe in it. I'm with you. When you say that there should be no interference in the internal elections and politics of sister countries, I'm with you. But you're being selective. When CARICOM leaders interfered in the 2020 election in Guyana, you said nothing, Kamala. And you said nothing because you were in opposition. You said nothing because your friends were being installed as a result of the interference. I say no more. If you're going to stand for principle, be consistent, Kamala. I disagree with you on your stance on America. America could defend itself. America could protect itself. Whether Trinidad or Guyana or Barbados stand with America or not, America is going to have its way in a world in which might is right. And I always say small countries like Trinidad and Guyana should not get in big countries' fight. That's my view. Kamala decided that she's going to take one stance. And she's going to criticize our brothers and sisters for taking a neutral position, because that's what CARICOM has done. They haven't taken an anti-American position. They've taken a neutral position. They're supporting supporting Cuba and condemning what's happening in Cuba as a fellow Caribbean country. She said, all of you here have been elected by free and fair election. Why do you want to deny the people of Cuba free and fair election? All of a sudden, Kamala discover. How does she know that The leaders she is talking there, all of them came to power as a result of free and fair elections. She just wants to be opportunistic about it. You don't have to agree with the Cuban political system. I don't agree with one-party government. I don't. But I support Cuba as a third world country struggling to bring social justice to its people. I don't agree with the one-party system. I don't want a one-party system in Guyana. I'm fighting the single dominant party system in Guyana. You don't have to agree with the Cuban system, but that should not prevent you from standing up for human rights in Cuba as you must stand up for human rights in America and Canada and Britain and Guyana and St. Vincent and the Grenadines and other places. Get it right, Kamala. Get it right. Get it right. I don't agree with the government of Guyana. But does that mean that I will support Venezuela walking into Guyana? No. I make a distinction between the government of Guyana and the sovereignty of Guyana. And the sovereignty of Guyana is as sacred as the sovereignty of Trinidad and Tobago, and the sovereignty of the United States of America, and the sovereignty of Cuba. I don't care how many dictators they remove. That's not my business if they remove a dictator in Venezuela or Guyana or wherever it is. You know. But I stand for the sovereignty of the country. And I make a distinction between the government and the sovereignty of the country. Get it right, Kamala. Get it right. CARICOM has no business taking any side in big people fight. You're representing the country. If your party, the UNC, wants to be pro-America, that's your party's business. But your party's in government. You're representing more than UNC. You're representing the totality of the society and by extension, our Caribbean. And you must make that distinction. People have a right to be pro-American. People have an equal right to be anti-American in terms of their policy. There are people who are pro-American in terms of American position. God bless them. There are people who are anti-American policy. There are Americans who are anti-American. Not anti-American as anti-American society, but anti-American policies, the present policies of America. People must have a right. If Americans have the right to criticize their government policies, then if people in Trinidad feel that they should do so, then they have a right to do so. But I'm saying when you become the leader of the country, you're not just leading your party. It's one of my fights with the PPP. Every time they opened their mouth in the National Assembly and began to talk about the party's manifesto, I glare at them. Your manifesto belongs to Freedom House, not the House of Assembly, the House of the National Assembly, not Parliament House. We can do better as a nation. We can do better as a region. We just have to get our principles right. Make our distinctions. Narratives are important. And when you mess with the narratives today, you create crisis for tomorrow. Burnham did not drop from the sky. He came from Kitty. Just as Jagan came from Port Morant. They both came from the wombs of this country. They're products of this country. They made mistakes. They committed errors of judgment, political judgment, economic judgment. But they're not demons. They're not demons. The University of Guyana, in terms of the staff there, the lecturers and so on, lecturers were more pro-WPA and some of them were pro-PPP. Very few of the lecturers were pro-PNC. Yet the PNC and Burnham never stopped financing, the University of Guyana. Never stopped financing the University of Guyana. But this PPP don't like people at UG, and they're definancing UG. They cannot control UG, so they're turning it into a second-rate university when we have the resources to turn into a first-rate university. Policy. You don't have to like UG. You don't have to like the people who are there. It's our national university. It should be the pride of all of us. We have to do better as a nation. That's a legacy. One of the legacies of Rupert Roopnarine. Nationhood. Our nation. A lot of people say, oh, I'm Guyanese first, and all that is rhetoric. You're Guyanese also. You're Indian, you're poor. You're West Indian, and you're Guyanese. Not Guyanese first, I'm Guyanese also. We get the language right, we will get the policies right. But Nathaniel Critchlow and Marisha and others, they came back after a trade union meeting in Europe, and they came back to the Caribbean, and they began to talk about Caribbean independence. There was no Guyana then. We were British Guyana. We were not Guyana. Where do you get off that you are Guyana first? Guyana came into being in 1966. Before that, we were all colonized peoples. And we gained our freedom from colonialism together. It's nonsense people talk sometimes. I'm not ceding Guyana to anybody. I'm not ceding my Guyanese identity to anybody, but I am not privileging Guyanese identity over my ethnic identity, my religious identity, my class identity. They're all my identities. I claim them. When you say I'm Guyanese first because you don't want to deal with the problems of Amerindian people. They're suffering because they're Guyanese. No, they're suffering because they're the children of Amerindians, who we call bush people. That's why they're suffering. When you talk about Guyanese, you want to hide and you don't want to confront the suffering of the poor and the powerless. They're suffering because they're Guyanese. There are plenty of Guyanese who are not suffering. They're suffering because they're Amerindians. I'm Guyanese first. You don't want to deal with the issue that black people, African people, are being punished in Guyana. Whether it's intentionally or unintentionally, they're being punished. And when you say, oh, I'm Guyanese first and all that nonsense, then you don't want to confront the uncomfortable truth that people in this country are suffering because of their ethnicity. Black young people are disproportionately targeted by the police, not because they're Guyanese, but because they're African Guyanese. Look where the police stations are. All of the police stations in Guyana, look where they're located, in proximity to black villages. The police force came into being shortly after emancipation in 1838. 1839, they came into being. And they built police stations, not on the sugar plantations. They weren't policing the white masses on the sugar plantation. They were policing Africans. Look at the police stations. Just look at them. They're either in black villages or in close proximity to black villages. Guyanese, know your history and understand what that history means. And when you say, I am Guyanese first, insinuating you're not Indian Guyanese, or you're not African Guyanese, or you're not Amerindian Guyanese, or Chinese or Portuguese, it's your way of avoiding the uncomfortable truth in our country. Those who killed the freedom fighters of 1763 and 1823, you think they were killing Guyanese? They were killing black people whose only crime was that we want to be free. Oh my God, I want to be free. I want to be free. Cut their heads off and hang it up on Parade Street, paraded it there. And you are telling me today you want to ignore that? And you're saying to me, David, ignore that because you're not going to win votes? Keep your votes. I will keep my dignity. If I have a choice between votes and dignity, I will choose dignity. It was the great Mahatma Gandhi who said, if I had to choose between violence and cowardice, I will choose violence any day. The prince of nonviolence, that's what he said. We are moving on as we must. I thank you all for staying with me tonight. It's been one of those nights when the Spirit moves in me and brings forth the words of my mouth, the meditation of my soul and my heart. Some things have to be said. Somebody has to say them to wake this country up out of its slumber. Some of it is willful, some of it is induced. Slumber it is nevertheless. As Rupert Rupnarine once said in Better Hope at a meeting, the dooms may vary, but the dooms are the dooms. We're going to make our country better. We shall not evade the uncomfortable truths. One more time.